in the book of Luke where Jesus was talking and saying, to give and it shall be given, pressed down, running over. You ever read that? I kept reading that and something triggered in my mind and my heart this evening. And it reminded me of a story that perhaps maybe the majority of you have heard before. And I'm going to give you what I feel that the Holy Ghost is saying this evening. I remember as a construction worker and being a contractor that there was a story floating around, and several ministries have used this story, and for some reason it came back to me this evening when I came across the very latter part of chapter 6. And the story goes a little like this. It was a man that was going to build a house, and he went in to talk to his boss that has employed this general contractor for several years. As a matter of fact, it's almost time to retire. And the story unfolds as that when the boss tells the contractor that this would be his last house that he will ever build, and he wants to make it the best house that he has ever built since in business. So the man that has worked for him for 30 plus years, the story is unfolding to where he's sitting across the desk with the plans in his hand, and he is extremely upset, and he says to this man that has employed him for 30 plus years, he said, I can't believe that you're just going to call us in the office and tell us this is the last house that we will ever build. You didn't let us down easy. You didn't tell us that, go find another job. You didn't express to us the value of the keeping a job with our family. You could at least told us 6 months ago that we were, not going to have a job. Now we got to go find something, and he's infuriated, and now he's angry at the man that's sitting across the table. The man that has employed him for many years responds back to the angry man that has worked for him and said, I am sorry that you were disappointed in me, but this is the last house. I'm moving on with my life. I'm retiring, and I want you to do the best that you can. And this is going to be a beautiful home. When you open the plans, you're going to see that it's a beautiful home. This man jumps up from the desk and runs to the crews and starts putting things together. What the man that had hired him 30 plus years ago didn't realize was the gentleman that he had employed, the boss, is going to start cutting corners. Instead of giving him $450,000 to build a house, the story is that he starts cutting corners, and he is pocketing some of the money because he feels like that it's only fair for him to have a piece of the pie. Are you with me? And so when the walls and the concrete goes up, there's not so much fiber in the concrete. The slump is not very good. The forms are just a little crooked. He starts hiring cheap labor. The walls go up, and instead of putting on 16 in some interior walls, he was putting 24 inches instead of 16 inches and cutting corners. When it came to using good brad nails or good nails, he was shooting cheap nails. Instead of putting 2 or 4 on each side, he'd put 1 or 2 because he was angry. He told the crew what to do. Are you with me today? And so the crowd, the building begins to erect, and we find in this story that as it unfolds that the wiring is not as credible as it needs to be. There are shortcuts and receptacles, and the shingles is not as good as the quality, and the insulation is a hit and miss here and there, and then the paint is cheap, and the concrete slab is again driving up to the door is very, very cheap. And so when the last doorknob gets put on the house, all the switches are working that is in the house. Then he takes the plans back, and he He gives the man the plans. So here's the key to your house. It is complete. The man sitting across the table says, "Sit down, sir." He sat down and he said, "I know that you're angry with me and this is the last house I'll ever build. But I want you to know that these keys doesn't belong to me. They belong to you. I built this house for you." The heart of this man that had cut all the corners of his life starts to sink down in the chair because he cut so many corners, even he himself wouldn't even live in the house. The man looked across the table at him and said, "If you're going to build a house, you know how to build one, and surely this is the best house we've ever built. Because living where we live, you've always had to build a house with a storm in mind. The hurricanes would come, the winds would blow." And so that story today intrigued me. For some reason, it came to me this evening when I started reading where Jesus starts giving a substratum of where a man and a woman should be. Are you with me this evening? You know, there comes a time when you can hoop, but there comes a time when the Holy Ghost just needs to talk to me. I found out that in construction work and even here in Kentucky, that there are men that will cutthroat just to have a job. That's the name of the business. That's what they do. I understand that. But if you're going to have good quality work, you've got to start from a good foundation. And that's not just pouring a slab or a footer. That's going and looking at the integrity. Somebody got the Holy Ghost already. The integrity of a man that will tell you that he will build you a house. I have found in 18 years almost pastoring in Williamstown that there have been those that have come to church and those that seem to have every 2 by 4 correct. Every center is right. The square is okay. It seems like everything in their world and their house has been just right, only to find out that when you uncover a man's life, you'll find that there are stud walls on 24 inches instead of 16. Insulation is missing. Rock is a 1/4 inch, not a 1/2 inch. The paint is peeling off the wall. Nobody took good care of the house. I found out in these scriptures this evening that God was relating this to man and woman and every young person. And I must try my best, young men, to tell you the importance and the value of building your relationship with God on solid ground. Because Jesus starts out with saying these words. He said, "A man that will hear my word and not do them." He said, "I want to give you a syllabus of what a man will become when he hears my word and he refuses to do it." Jesus said these words, and it was very plain, and I read them from time to time. He said, "A man that will hear what I have to say, but yet reject everything that I say, he is like a man that went and built a house upon the sand." And ladies and gentlemen, you know that if you're going to build on the sand, especially where I come from, there has to be a company called the Pylon Company. They drive 90-foot pylon, wooden crystal pylons down every 4 foot, 2 foot apiece, apart, 4 foot square, because they know that in the bowl of New Orleans that if a hurricane comes or the dam would break, which it did in Katrina and several times in different places, that if the water could ever get under the houses that were built in the sand, that they would sink where they are, they would start cracking the foundation, they would lose everything that they have in the house. So they come up with this plan to start driving pylons in. And every time you see a freight truck come by with a load of pylons, contractors will sometimes follow. Are y'all with me tonight? They will sometimes follow the truck because we want to know what subdivision they're going in. And surely that if there's pylons being driven, then somebody's got a mindset that if I'm going to build a house here, I'm going to build it correctly. But I have seen also where they have driven pylons, where the ground would shift. No joke, from the house, concrete slab, to the street that would pass by is at least 50 foot to the center of the road. Sometimes even 100 foot is according to the code of the subdivision. That the concrete trucks and the dump trucks and the trucks pulling dozers would just pass by, and the ground would shake and the houses would start sinking. Rains would come, winds would blow, and after a while you'd have to have another company to come in that's not a pylon company. It's another company that will come in and dig out and put jacks and pump mud under it to lift it up. Many times have we started building something that the engineer would come out and say, stop, this is incorrect. Have to pull the crew off and go somewhere else because I want to talk about the sandy area. Can we talk about the sandy area? I think it's every man's job in America, not just in the church, to lead their families in the direction that will teach them the value of not building a house on sand. You cannot put sand in anything that it doesn't capsule, and put water in it that it doesn't wash it away. Sand is not an opponent to water. It's an opponent to wind, but it's not an opponent to water. Are you with me this evening? Men that have come quickly to build quick houses, sometimes cut corners, and it looks good for the first 6 months, but when you're sitting in your living room and you realize that the paint is cracking or peeling, and that there's cracks over the doors, and the floors are bucking and they're squeaking, and it's because the trim is coming down. They didn't use the right they used what they could, but they cut corners. It's building a house on sand. I realized today, and it was so ironic that all the alarms went off this morning, and I jumped up, and my house was very quiet, and I run to the front door and opened the front door, and I heard the sirens. I heard the phones going off. I heard all of this information coming in, this heavy alert. And I realized that we were okay because I've been under my house, and it's a pretty solid house. And if I had to, I could go to the basement to have total safety if I had to. But I want to be honest with you, as a man of my house and a man of this city here, I spoke to the winds that were coming, and I said, tornado, you have a master this morning, and you're not coming to Williamstown. You hear me? I told the banker that today, and she just looked at me. I told the woman at the dentist today getting my teeth cleaned, and she almost cried. And she said, I'm from Michigan, and you don't hardly hear men speak like that anymore. And I said, I'm not telling you that it was my prayer that changed the direction of that, but I will tell you that I stood, because I'm a man that believes building your house on the rock. A man that will not build his house on the rock is quickly building, because the Bible said that if a man seeketh quick riches, that his soul shall be condemned. He will cut corners in making himself rich. I didn't write it. The Bible said that. A man that seeketh riches to be rich quickly, his soul would be in damnation, because somewhere he's going to lie. Somewhere he's going to cut corners. Somewhere that when the storms of life come to him, it's going to blow on his house, it's going to blow on his assets, and it's going to remove the value. Are you with? I'm talking to daddies today. I'm talking to mamas that's raising your kids by yourself, and you that are watching live. I feel this in my spirit today. Are you with me? It's amazing that one house in the subdivision today doesn't get touched, but the house next to it doesn't have a roof. Isn't that amazing? So it makes you want to think, did one have brackets and the other didn't because of shortcuts? Or what happened there? A man that will quickly try to gain riches will soon find himself without a job, will soon find himself without a house, and soon find himself without anything that is tangible, that is of any value. The problem with building a house on the sand is that if your mindset, can I talk to us a little bit? Our mindset is that if it's built on the sand, then we must not really going to be living in the house very long. There might be something in my heart that I will say, if I'm going to cut corners in building my house, there's something wrong with me, because if I want to resell and you have a good engineer to come by, they will come by and they will condemn my own work. Something else that bothers me about building a house on the sand, we've watched them, we've done it. I've watched hurricanes come through and wipe houses out. That's the modern homes in the Gulf Coast and the New Orleans area. But some of those old houses that's endured all of those storms is still there today. They've never been moved, because somebody at the engineer department said, when I'm coming together, I'm not just building this house to live on the sand and next to the seashore, that when I look out my window and my door that I can see the ocean front. But not only that, they build it with a storm in mind, because they have valuables that's inside their home. The valuables is not china cabinets and gold and silver and all kinds of pretty furniture. Their valuables is their family. So you find now that, when you build a house on sand, there has to be something wrong with a man that doesn't drive pylons and pour extra deep footers, and everywhere there's a chase wall and everywhere there's a load-bearing wall, according to the plans, you dig deeper and you want more of that pole exposed in concrete. Are you with me? And he said, a man that will hear my word and then not do it is like a man that will build his house on sand, and that when the winds blow and the rains descend vehemently, that it is great. The fall of the house is great. He is saying to them and saying to us that when you hear what I have to say and you reject what I have to say, how can your house stand when I give you the greatest instructions that a man could ever have, is the syllabus and the in-depth Word of God, and then his house begins to crack. I have remembered that when storms come, that men would have to build their houses on stilts, because when the waters would rise and the tide would come in, the wakes would hit, it would just destroy everything. So they come up with this plan that even though they were on soft ground, that they was going to pour a slab and put it on pylons and then build gigantic pillars to erect their house on top of. So if the water was to come, that they could, are y'all with me now? That they could, bypass the storm. But I can't tell you how many times that even though they did that the house was top heavy, that after a storm would come, they would call me and my dad to come in and look at it, and the house would be pivoted just a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right, or the slab would be cracking and folding in. It's not safe to live in. And then somebody would come out and they would perk test, and they would grab the sand and the dirt, and they would say, why didn't you tell somebody that this dirt and this sand was this loose under you? You can't build a house here. No wonder your house is falling and it's failing. But Jesus also kept going with the conversation. Jesus said, but if a man will take the time to dig very deep. Are y'all hearing me now? He gave a schematic here that if a man would take his time and he would dig very deep, and he would come to the bedrock and something that is solid, that is not by the seashore where the storms can blow it away so easily. But he didn't remove it, hear me now, because he put the houses in the same area. It's just one that's on the sand. He said, but another didn't build on top of the sand. He dug past the sand and he got got down to the bedrock and he built it in the same area, it's okay. But the one that hears my word and rejects it is he that doesn't dig deep. He just puts it on top, and when the winds blow, it falls. But there's also another type of man and another type of woman and another type of relationship that says, whatever I have to do, I have to dig deep. It may cost a little bit more money. It may cost a little bit more time. But if I'm going to save my house and save my family and know what's valuable in my house, I have to dig deep. Are you with me? Because the man that digs deep takes the time to sit down at a table or a chair and think about, what if I build the house and a storm was to come? Am I going to take the time to build the house correctly, that when the storm comes, that I don't have anything to worry about? I can run to the basement. I don't have to worry about the sand falling out from under, because I've done something that the first man didn't do. I passed up the sand. You with me today? A man that will dig deep will make sure that Jesus said that before he goes to build a house, he sits down, counts the cost, and then he'll tell himself, can I build or not? He said if a man goes to war, the man will sit down, count the cost, and then he'll tell himself, can I or can I not go to war? Building a house with a storm in mind is the most valuable thing that you will ever do. Are you hearing me this evening? You're either bored or quiet. If the Lord ever blessed me to build a house, I don't see what y'all see in basements. I hate basements. But basements are priceless when a storm is coming. Because there's a certain amount of peace of knowing that my house could protect me. And then when the storm is past, I can still walk outside and have my house. Are you hearing me? In closing this evening, I can't understand how they take a 102-story building and put it in the middle of a city and build it and weigh it down and build it and weigh it down. In closing tonight, I found out that large structures and infrastructures is something that attracts me. I don't want to just stand there and look at it. I want to know how they started it, how they dealt with the process, and how they completed it, and then step back and look at it and think, I wonder why they built it the way they built it. When you're 170, 80 stories in the air and a storm is coming, you don't just have a man that knows how to run a shovel to build a skyscraper. Hold on to me now, okay? But you have engineers that comes literally from every part of the world, because they have figured out that if I can get all of the knowledge that to build this skyscraper in America, or whether it be in Dubai, whether it be in wherever, they pull major architects and engineers together, and they put them at a table. They rent them houses there. They're going to stay there for weeks and months before they break the ground. The purpose of that is that they build buildings, skyscrapers, with such magnitude to endure force that even if a plane hits it, it doesn't topple over. Are you with me? And they're designed that when the wind comes, they literally do this. If an earthquake decides to come, the buildings are designed and engineered to do this. That's where they do it. You try to figure all of that out. I can't figure that out. But if you can sit down with an engineer and he can describe what it takes to cause a building to sway, with what concrete to put where to put what metal, and how they force it and pull it apart and see the strength of the metal. That's how they do this. But it all has to start with the foundation. Are you with me? Are you still with me tonight? And I found out that these infrastructures, when they get so high, the reason that I want to go to Dubai is because some of the largest buildings in the world is in Dubai. The last one that they built was so gigantic, the next to the last one, that it has 2 bars on the top of it. And it twists as it goes up. Number one, they wanted it to be a representation of something that they deal with there or they serve there, and it twists. But not only that, they figured out that the first one they built, it collapsed because the wind, they didn't take the time to build it correctly. But the engineers from all over the world came together and started putting their minds together, and they said, this was your problem. And so what they did is they went higher and bigger with the next one. It has withstood all kinds of storms off the beachfront. There's a place called, it's a man-made beach called Palm Beach. I want to go there. I may not never go there, but I want to go there. I want to go into that building. You're able to go into that building through security. And I want to tell you that when I started looking at some of these structures, the greatest architect that I had ever come in contact with is the one that stepped out on nothing and looked at a chaotic world and spoke it into existence. He hung the sun, the moon, and the stars. He causes the clouds. The Bible said the clouds are the dust of the Lord's feet. The thunderings is his voice. And hear me when I tell you, he's the greatest architect that the earth has been here for all of these years, and it's never moved. So when you correlate that creation to where he is at right now, talking about a house built on the sand and the rock, he is letting us know that if you'll just stop and take your time, and don't worry about trying to get quick riches, and don't worry about trying to get quick this and quick that, just take your time and dig a little bit deeper. And now the problem or the question is how do we dig to the rock? Because the sand can represent so many things in your life. It can be distractions in your life that you feel like that you don't have time to pray and time to read and time to spend with God. That's the sand that you're building upon. It's because it's so available and so convenient to just go ahead and form up and start building and hoping that when the waters come and the winds blow, that your house won't go anywhere. But it's the sands that represents distractions to where we have greater relationship with people than we do God. Are you hearing me? The sands is a representation that if I go ahead and do it this way, that I can go ahead and do it my way here, and perhaps it'll be okay. But at the end of the day, your house is not going to stand. It's the distractions of the sand that makes everything in your life look so convenient until the storm shows up, and now you're going to have fear and you're going to worry. What's going to happen now? Because I really didn't take the time to read and to pray and to spend time with God, and I kept rejecting. And some of these sands is a representation of rejecting what God has said to us on how, in terms of building a house on the rock. But it's too convenient, preacher, to do it this way. If any man come up any other way, he's a thief and a robber. The sands is a representation of making everything in your life convenient just for a season. And after that season, the trials and the tribulations and the storms of life will hit you. Now you're going to sit there in your living room wondering, how did I get here? What caused my house to shift? It's just simply you allowed distractions to overpower your relationship with God. But let me encourage you. Take a shovel and shovel all the distractions out of the way. Pick it all out of the way. Backhoe it all out of the way. Take the time. Can I take you there for a second? Because if you'll grab a shovel, and if you'll grab a backhoe, and if you'll grab posto diggers, and you'll grab square points and round points, and you'll grab all kinds of utensils and tools to remove the sand, between the time you start removing the sand to the time, hold on to me, to the time that you get to the rock, that's a moment that God talks to you and builds you as well, starting to build on the rock. Because now, if we're going to have a solid foundation, God has to change me. Because my nature is take shortcuts. But let me encourage you tonight. Build your house. Build your house with a storm in mind. Don't reject his word. For a man that heareth my word, he said, and doeth them, he said, he's like a man that built a house on the rock. Are you hearing me today? Because after all, at the end of the day, you have children. You have spouses, you have grandchildren, you have great-grandchildren that needs to feel safety when they come to your house. Not be scared that something's going to blow up and something's going to change or harm them and destroy the relationship with you or myself. They need to know that when they come to Papa's house, they may not always be cookies and milk. And it may not always be zebra cakes. And it may not always be a Pop-Tart. But I can tell you, you don't have to look in the cabinets to find the love of a Papa. Because they didn't come for the cake after all. They come to get the love from their Papa. Ain't that amazing? Daddy, they come home every day because they want to be with you. Mother, they come home. And you have a responsibility this evening. Build your house. I know we're not hooping, we're not screaming, and we're not shouting. But I learned to quit listening to voices that didn't come from God. I started building my house in 1989. And I'm going to be honest with you. The influences, and I'm closing at 8:17. The influences that was in my life when I got in church, some of them were influences that only built and only knew how to build on sand. Because every time something would come up in their life, they would leave the church and leave God out of the equation. And I just told my brother this week or last week that all those people that served God when I got in church, most of them's gone, and now some of their own children that's the same age as I am has passed on because Daddy didn't protect them. They turned out to be homosexuals. They turned out to be all kinds of stuff, getting involved and being influenced with all kinds of things. Some of them that's 45, 50 years old literally looks like they're 65 because sin has took a toll on their life. They didn't build a house. But isn't it amazing that when troubles strike, there's nothing in Mike Pullins, but they know where to call. Because I decided to quit following people that their houses kept crumbling. And I decided to quit following people and listen to people that their relationship never got off the ground in the church. That all they had, all the positive, all the things they had to say was negative about preachers in church because the preacher would preach it, but they rejected it, so they built their house on sand. And when I realized one day that I cannot follow influences, I have to find a man of God and take my wife and my children to the church. And I may not understand a lot of things, but I do understand one thing. Being submissive to the preacher as he preaches me the word, it taught me to run a backhoe. It taught me to not be scared of a shovel. And it taught me to be a working man and dig past the sand and the distractions of life and dig and plant my house and my family on a rock. And because of that, the blessings of the Lord has followed me. Are y'all still with me? If you want to stand tonight, that's okay. I pulled up after I got my teeth clean, I pulled up in Dry Ridge to get a bowl of chili. That's all I wanted was a bowl of chili. I hadn't eaten. And she said it'll be $11 and some change. That's the most expensive bowl of chili I ever seen. And I said, well, whatever. Well, anyway, I stuck $12 in there, and it was a drink that was added and something else. Anyway, I just gave them the money, and the window slammed. And the storm was coming. And I'm listening to gospel music on the old blue truck. And I'm enjoying my evening, getting ready for service tonight. And all of a sudden, a woman opened the window. She had that $12 folded up and shoved it back in my truck. And I said, what's wrong? My money ain't good enough? You need a card? She said, no. She said, there's a gentleman that saw you. And he come across the counter and said, don't you let that man pay for his food. He said, I got it. I said, who is the man? And he made his way to the window. And I know who he is. And I almost started weeping because the Lord let his blessings follow me every day. There ain't nothing that tastes better than a bowl of chili that was free. That was the best bowl of chili I had ever eaten in my life from Wendy's. You know what he said? He stuck his head out the door and he said, I've been having people tell me I need to come visit you at the church. I said, man, you need to come on. Some of you would know him if you. And he said, I'm coming. I only said that to say this. I learned to build my house on a rock. Have I done it all right? No. Have you made mistakes? Oh, yes, plenty of mistakes. There's been a couple of times I had to remove a wall or tear the shingles off and replace some things, and hot water heater may go out and things may happen, but I'm still on the rock. I didn't change. I didn't move. And there were times when I was told, since I've been right here in Kentucky, by people that do not attend this church anymore, told me that I could have the largest church in the state of Kentucky if I would just only back off of what I believe. And the words was, if you'll just compromise a little bit with your ministry, you could have the biggest church in the state of Kentucky. And I'm going to tell you right now, when I dug down on the rock and built my house, there ain't absolutely no way that I'm going to compromise. You hear what I said? And change the way I believe, because I found out that this way is the best way. Are you hearing me? And I said, there's no way I'd rather have a handful of people that want to go to heaven than to have 5,000 sitting in a stadium somewhere and I'm not preach nothing. I would be worth my salt. And one thing that I was able to do when I went home, when I preached her mother's funeral, I looked at all of those pioneers that were sitting on those pews, them old gray-haired pioneers. You hear me tonight? I'm walking off this platform because I'm done. I looked at them people. My wife was sitting there. Some of the family was sitting there. And they didn't know what this old Pullins boy was going to say. And so I just, you know what I said? You know, them old timers, Sister Lori, when the Holy Ghost get on their head would shake. they'd speak in tongues, you know. That's what they did. JT's doing this for me. His head's doing this. And they sit there and they would worship. And the little, you know, their hands was tight when I was a kid, but now they're all wrinkled. And they used to have a head full of hair, and now that's all gray and thin. And some of them still wearing them old dresses, them old flowery dresses, and they just beautiful, beautified in holiness, and they look so good. And all the musicians on the platform, and some of them wasn't even on the platform. They was outside. There was so many musicians, and they just looking at me. And some of them old men that preached this thing for 60, 70 years are sitting there. Some of them's in wheelchairs. Some just barely could get out of the car. And I got up and I said, well, I got one thing to say to you. I'm still preaching the same thing y'all preached to me. And I never compromised one bit. I never gave it up. Now, I didn't tell them this, but I can say this to you. It's because I built on a rock. And I looked at all them old folks and I said, you taught me right. And your way was the best way. And I still preach this Acts 2:38, and I still believe in living holiness, and I still do what you told me to do. I'm still in this thing. And listen, some of those old folks started crying, and after church, after that sermon, they come up to me and said, Brother Mickey, someone called me Mickey, someone called me Brother Michael, said, Brother Mickey, I'm telling you right now, if I didn't get anything else out of this service, out of this funeral today, what you said was, I'm still preaching it. You know what they said to me? So it really does work, don't it? You better believe it really does work. Living for God and building on the rock is the way to go. In closing right now, as Cooper comes, let me encourage your hearts. When I walk off this platform, I'm done. Don't take shortcuts. Start fabricating your house. No, I'm not saying go home and dig poles and stuff out of the back of your truck and measuring tapes. I'm just saying, go sit down in your living room. And sometimes the best way is to sit by yourself and just start thinking about what can I do to change my ways, my house. What can I do? And it's just little increments here and there that'll cause you to start recognizing, and the results is, wow, my house is better off now than it's ever been. You know why? Somebody say why? Because he's the chief cornerstone and he's in control. That's all I feel the Holy Ghost wants me to say to you tonight. So you're on your own.